Hey, welcome back to Movie Talk Season 2. I'm Mason Cruzy.
And I'm Mitch Corrado, and today we'll be reviewing the 1993 blockbuster smash hit, Jurassic Park.
A group of people must fight for survival after a theme park's power failure causes their cloned dinosaurs to run loose. Let's start just a little bit more broad, and then we can go down into the nitty-gritty. So the action in this film and just the sheer adventure is fantastic. And this is something that Steven Spielberg has perfected over the years with Indiana Jones, with Jaws. This is a classic adventure film.
I would agree entirely. I think that with a film like this, it's very action-oriented, and it's very prevalent with the dinosaurs and the use of CGI editing. And they make everything very lifelike, and you're always on the edge of your seat because you're waiting to see what happens, because it's really that realistic that you get drawn into the movie. It does a good job of keeping you entertained throughout the entirety of its duration.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the CGI. So what do you think about that? Because I think that the dinosaurs, for the most part, look great, especially for 1993. There were some CGI moments that I did not think were so great. Like there's a scene where a flock of dinosaurs comes in and they don't look great, and I think that was the only moment that
I think when they paired the CGI dinosaurs with the actors, there were some overlaps where you could see the outline because there was a lot of movement. Yeah, at least that's what I saw. But the T-Rex scenes and the big dinosaurs, I feel like that's done really well. And for a film that was made in 1993, it was almost a catalyst for future films to begin using this kind of editing. I think even now, with it being more than 20 years old, it still stands as one of the best examples of CGI rendered creations for a movie.
Absolutely, but I actually think that the best looking dinosaurs in this movie are not the CGI ones, but the robotic ones, because for some of the T-Rex scenes, they actually had a robotic T-Rex, and those scenes look fantastic. But it's funny, because I actually watched a bit of behind the scenes on this, and I learned that one of the scenes that I thought used a robotic T-Rex actually used a CGI T-Rex, and the car in that scene was CGI. It's when the dinosaur is ramming into the side of the car and then it's trying to throw him off the cliff there. I thought that was filmed practically, and that was CGI. I had no idea. So
I think that only goes to show how convincing it is. I mean, if you see it and you think, oh, that was filmed with just props and real actors, but you look into it further and see that it was done with CGI, I mean, isn't that the goal, really, is to make it as realistic as possible?
Exactly. I 100% agree. I mean, it actually had me fooled.
I don't believe it.
I think one of the most impressive things about this movie and its production with Spielberg is that while he was working on Jurassic Park, at the same time, he was still working on Schindler's List.
Oh, okay, yeah, because they were released in
the same year. And the fact that he was able to balance both of them, and both these films are very, highly rated and praised by practically every film critic.
Yes.
I think that really, speaks for itself in terms of how good a director he is and the ability he has to really balance two massive projects.
Yes, but so different projects. I mean, Jurassic Park was probably his escape from Schindler's List.
It was, because Spielberg, when he's doing these kind of movies, they're typically serious undertones.
Yeah.
And Jurassic Park doesn't take itself too seriously.
Right.
It still maintains a level of thrill and horror, and that's what I love about it the most, is that it's able to shift its atmosphere very well throughout the halfway point in the movie, because the first half of the movie, you see the dinosaurs in this positive light. They're very awe-inspiring. Your jaw's on the floor.
Yep.
They're very scenic. And then once the power goes out, it's scary, terrifying, and you're on the edge of your seat, waiting to see what happens next. What dinosaur's going to come and attack somebody. Mm-hmm. And I think its ability to seamlessly change from two completely different environments in terms of how you view a film is quite impressive.
Right, but now that you bring up that halfway point and that shift, I almost feel like there was a little bit too much exposition, if I had one complaint, because the actual power failure and all this action doesn't happen until an hour in or halfway in. And it feels like that beginning hour is packed with a little too much. I mean, I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more of that action and dinosaur terror versus all this setup to get to what is essentially one giant action scene for the last hour, which is just, all the
Yeah, I
dinosaurs.
agree. The only action scene in the beginning comes at the very beginning when they're showing how they get dinosaurs from the cages into the park.
Right.
But then from that point onwards, for about an hour or so, you're right. It's just all set up. And that brings me into my one glaring issue with this movie is that there's so much set up, but in my opinion, I think the plot and the characters are all very dry and bland. I feel as if they're not getting you involved with the plot very much, which is it's sad because every actor in this movie is capable and willing to portray a character that has emotional changes and goes through a cycle. And besides Sam Neill's portrayal of Dr. Alan Grant, I don't think any character goes through any significant change throughout the movie.
Right. They all, you are right. Well, I guess, if you talk about Hammond, he kind of has a different outlook on the
True,
whole
but
thing.
no, I don't think any of them are big enough to really make you become invested in the character. At the end of the movie, I didn't go to myself, wow, I really love how he changed his character or how Dr. Grant changed or how Mr. Hammond changed.
Right.
It's all,
Yes.
they're background characters. They're vessels to propel the action forward.
I agree with you saying that they don't really change and they don't get you invested, but I definitely love Ian Malcolm's character.
I think Jeff Goldblum brings a really good, wacky, sporadic sense of humor that he usually has. And that's not my problem. I think every actor does a good job portraying their role. And I don't think it's necessarily their fault. I think it's just the writing that
Right.
portrays them in a certain way that they're not allowed to really venture out and express themselves more.
Right.
Even
and that's,
Samuel L. Jackson, too. In the very,
Yeah.
limited amount of time he has in the film, I would like to see more of him.
was that early for him, or was that just...
That was before Pulp Fiction.
So that was before
he
kinda
was
had
a
his...
critical success, yeah.
Right, okay. So that one I can almost see.
But even in that, roughly 20 or 25 minutes he has on screen, he's very striking.
That's one of the things that this movie kind of doesn't have as much of, because Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie, directed by Steven Spielberg, is that solid adventure. But the difference with that is that it does have better characters, I think. And with Jaws, too. The characters in Jaws are absolutely fantastic, and that is where Jurassic Park falls short, I think, is in the characters.
Oh, there it is.
There isn't a lot of dialogue in this film that I think is very quotable. Some from Jeff Goldblum is.
Sure.
But I think outside of that, it's very forgettable. Besides, Welcome to Jurassic Park, that's really about all anyone remembers.
The only line, right.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
And with that, I want to talk about the score by John Williams.
Yes. Okay.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic. And like I said, he's able to capture the element of each scene in such different ways. Obviously the opening theme, everyone knows it. It's iconic. Even when it goes to the more scary parts in the movie, he's able to switch it immediately to something more daunting and eerie that really sets you in the mood.
It always has a magical tone to it, too. It's kind of like, I don't know what he's using, but it always has this sparkliness to it that I just love it. He doesn't fail. There's no soundtrack that he's done where I think that wasn't as good. Indiana Jones, Jaws, Star Wars, Jurassic Park. He has a wonderful track record, and this movie is no exception to that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think he does a fantastic job, and his legacy stands.
Yes.
And I think he's a big reason why this movie is so critically acclaimed. I even want to mention some of the nominations, that over 20 plus nominations for awards, from the MTV Awards, the Grammys, the BAFTAs, the Academy Awards. When it came out in 1993, it was the highest grossing film to date for the year and for its initial release before Titanic came along, about 4 years later. It's even preserved in the National Film Registry and Library of Congress as being a piece of history that must be preserved.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of scenes in that movie, when they meet the dinosaur for the first time, the Brachiosaurus, the T-Rex, the Velociraptors, that are very awe-inspiring and should be preserved because they're fantastic interactions in cinema.
Yes. I guess this is jumping back a bit, but the Dennis storyline about having to steal these embryos of the dinosaurs.
I don't like it whatsoever.
I agree, because it's too much. It adds too much. We could have just had a power failure from the storm, right? Because there's no real reason to have this in there. It complicates it. This is an adventure film, and I think that the story needs to be simple. And it really is, but that's almost because the Dennis storyline is ignored. You don't have to focus on it.
You're entirely correct. They spend all this time, like you said, at the beginning, establishing Dennis as the villain, as the bad guy. And, he does all these things to turn the power of the park, to get the vessels. But then halfway through, he dies, and it's just abandoned. The Barbasol canyon is covered in mud, and it's gone. And
yes.
I would have loved to see them have a plot where the main villain isn't the dinosaurs themselves, but somebody controlling them. Maybe he got them off the island, and then somebody harnessed the power of them. They have to go back to the mainland and stop them from making more dinosaurs. And they did that in the sequel, where they had the park in California.
Right, but they're terrible.
They're terrible, but I think if they were to add those elements into it, where it's a man-made disaster, as opposed to animals being the primary villain, it would have been more convincing.
But it is a man-made disaster. I mean,
yes,
it was
it is,
John Hammond.
but I mean, Dennis only wanted money. He didn't want to use the dinosaurs to hurt people or exploit people. He just wanted to sell for money, because he wasn't the one that was using them. He was hired by somebody to sell them.
Right.
But I would like to see somebody who would have taken DNA, made their own dinosaurs, and used them for some malicious deed.
Ooh, I'm not on the same page. I think that it should be only the dinosaurs.
And I don't mean in the way, like, he's an evil mastermind, but just in the way that he's trying to exploit people. Right,
but I mean, this movie as it is this great adventure film, and the Dennis storyline, whether you like it or not, I feel like kind of clouds the adventure, and I mean.
And if they were to make a real storyline, they would have to sacrifice some of that adventure. And I think if there were to be no real plot, if they didn't spend time setting up this whole Dennis plot, then if they just had the action and no defined plot, it would have been better, arguably. There are so many films that I love personally that have no plot whatsoever, because instead of focusing on the plot, they're focusing on characterization and evolution of certain characters' profiles.
Sure, yeah.
And I think if they got rid of the whole plot element they tried to establish, maybe then we'd have some more fleshed out characters.
So would you rather see a movie without any Dennis storyline and the park just goes berserk because of the storm and it's solid adventure, or would you rather go deeper into the plot with a man wielding the power of these dinosaurs?
I would rather have it be because of the storm. Because if you're going to make it man versus beast, you might as well add man versus nature into the mix as well.
Sure.
As opposed to having somebody shut it off manually. It's more of natural causes as opposed to somebody trying to steal dinosaurs.
Right. But not necessarily that the people are fighting with the storm, or that it's like a disaster storm movie, but so that the storm just kicks things off. Because like the park easily could have been written in where it shuts down and the power goes out because of the storm. It's written in that Dennis is the one who is the reason that these things are failing, that the security systems are failing. But I feel like that could have been just as easily accomplished with the storm. Oh, the power's out, the gates aren't working, something, just so we can focus on the adventure.
It's one less person to have to account for, in the whole storyline, because all the characters are so bland, and I don't want to have to think about who this character is or what prevalence he has in the movie or something that he has.
It also takes up so much time.
It doesn't lead to anything.
Right, exactly.
I would much rather had a solid 2 hours of this action and more fleshed out character development.
Yes.
They come on the island as somebody and leave as somebody else.
Right. And if you had to go with the Dennis, which, well, I don't agree, but if you had to go with the Dennis storyline of having more plot, you would have rather seen it go farther.
Yeah, if they felt the need to establish a definitive plot, I would like to see them further enhance the Dennis storyline and instead have him deliver the DNA to somebody and have somebody else become the main villain.
So they failed by going in the middle, because
they failed by trying to balance between plot and story.
Right.
They tried being the happy medium.
Story and
adventure.
adventure.
Story and adventure.
Because either go all in on the plot or
Yeah.
go all in on the adventure. They did a little bit of plot,
Yeah.
which dropped off. So that is
Yeah.
where they failed with that in that aspect. I mean, not saying it's a
Yeah.
bad movie at
And
all.
With
at all.
Spielberg's other movies, it's always one or the other in the absolute extreme. It's either
Yeah.
all action or all plot.
Right.
And I think you have to go to that length to make something that's striking to an audience.
I don't think you're giving us our due credit.
Spielberg, okay, we touched on him a little bit, but his camera angles and just his general style is absolutely fantastic. It suits this movie so well. No one else could have made it. That opening scene we talked about, I thought was fantastic. I mean, he used these harsh close-ups and these crooked angles. His long takes in the trailer when Hammond is trying to hire Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler. These takes are so long, it's not constantly cutting. He's doing a great job at keeping you in the story, I think. And long takes is something that, I mean, these days I don't feel like is utilized as much.
No. The only recent example I can think of is 1917.
Yeah, where
the whole movie's one take.
Right.
But with Jurassic Park, you're right. These long takes build suspense, especially when they're doing the sort of horror elements with the movie.
Sure.
And you're waiting and waiting and waiting. There's no music, and it's just a flashlights, or you see the eye dinosaur through the window.
The shot of Jeff Goldblum running with the flare as
Yeah.
the T-Rex is chasing him is great.
That's great. And he uses these fantastic lighting angles, and he uses the darkness to his advantage.
Yeah.
To make things seem more menacing, and the shadows are they're played on very well. And
Yeah.
I like the fact that he utilizes his environment. It doesn't feel fabricated. It doesn't feel like it's a movie set.
Right.
It feels like you're watching from the sideline.
Some of the scenes were shot on location, but then they had to come back, and they did have to build a set for the cars. The first scene where we first see the T-Rex, that was a set, and it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it because you're in this environment, and you're right. I mean, it really does put you in there. Well, that you brought up 1917, we might have to talk about that at some point because I don't think that the long take style suits that film well.
I don't either.
Really? Okay.
I don't. I really think that movie is highly overrated.
Yeah.
And I know that's a very controversial take, but if we were to do a review on it, I would definitely explain my position on it. Spielberg reached a happy medium, I think.
Yes,
Because
he did.
they're not long to the point where it's dragging on.
No,
but
or that you notice it, really.
Yeah,
I mean, because
yeah.
it's not too like...
But I think that's due in part to the action scenes, though, being so breathtaking.
Yeah.
You're not even noticing how long it goes on for.
Right, I mean, we're looking for it.
Because once the action scenes actually come in, the film doesn't drag as much anymore.
Right.
There's still a whole half of a movie left to watch, but every second feels like it's worth something.
Yes, and with his long takes, the only reason we're seeing it is because we're looking for it, just for this. But it is not so noticeable if you're just watching. It's just a technique that keeps you in the story. Whereas with movies that go like 1917, where they try to do the whole movie, what makes it good is the technical marvel. But that's just a gimmick, I feel like. So Spielberg uses that technique really well.
Yeah, I believe he does.
Let's talk about the ending. This is, I think, one of its weak points because...
I would agree. I would think it's quite...
It's so abrupt.
It is.
It's so abrupt. I mean, I love that the T-Rex comes in and kills the Velociraptor. But there's something that seems to fall flat with it because they get into the car, they go off, they get into the helicopter,
yeah.
and it's done.
There's a scene in the helicopter too where the camera pans to a flock of birds.
Yeah, right.
And then it's never alluded to. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like, oh, that's where it started, because they didn't use birds, they used frogs to create the dinosaurs.
Well, the birds was because the dinosaurs had evolved into birds.
Oh,
yeah.
But I would like to see Hammond look at the island a bit more, see it. I would like to see the island maybe not explode, but kind of fall apart.
So I see, actually, because Hammond must be going through a lot.
Well, yeah,
because
as somebody who wanted to create this massive park, he has all these people come trying to endorse it. No one's for it, and then everything goes wrong.
But it's his fault.
It's his fault.
But Hammond, he almost killed his grandchildren.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see more from him, and you're right, because, well, Sam Neill, Dr. Grant, comes in and says,
Mr. Hammond, after careful consideration, I've decided not to endorse your park.
So have I.
Hammond says, so have I.
Yeah.
That's all we have from him. He just had it. He almost single-handedly killed his grandchildren.
There is that scene where he's eating ice cream in the visitor center, and then Dr. Sattler comes in.
Yes.
And he talks about how he had a flea circus originally when he came from Scotland. And he's kind of arrogant in a way. He doesn't like to be wrong.
Right.
And it's funny how he hates all lawyers, and the only person that wants to endorse the park is the lawyer.
Is the lawyer, right.
Yeah.
So
who ends up dying when the first people die.
So, yes, I would have loved to see more from Hammond or something else that happens, because they're saved by the T-Rex, and it doesn't feel like the end. It just, it's a great scene.
That may be because they were trying to make a sequel. I bet they had a sequel in the running already.
I suppose, but
and they tried to leave it open-ended.
Yeah, I needed something else. I guess it might have been because they're trying to make a sequel, but it doesn't feel open. It just feels like there's a gap, because then we get an ending that kind of does feel like closure to me.
Yeah.
The helicopter driving away.
And you see, the theme plays with a little more melancholy and sad.
Yes,
Beautiful as opposed to being striking.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that it feels open. I just think there's a gap between when the T-Rex kills the Velociraptor and...
You're right, because they hop in the Jeep.
Yeah.
And they storm off to the helicopter landing pad and they're gone.
Could there have been another, chase in
scene?
there? Or another dinosaur pops out in the
chase
Jeep?
Scene. Yeah.
But I was thinking about that, and I would have loved to see another chase scene. But in Jurassic Park 2... they had that. You had an ending, and it felt like closure, but then we realized the T-Rex is on the cargo ship, and that was stupid.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering...
I would have loved to see a chase between the T-Rex scene and the helicopter scene, and instead of killing off Samuel Jackson's character, he comes back with a shotgun or something and kills the dinosaur.
Oh, I see.
Because
so
that's maybe just because I love him as an actor.
Yes.
And it would have been so cool to see him come back.
So
and
with
say some cool line.
with one arm, because he lost his arm.
Or maybe his arm's mangled or something instead of being cut off.
I can't decide if that's cool or ridiculous.
Jurassic Park it's a bit ridiculous.
Okay,
it's very ridiculous. Let's be honest.
Okay, sure.
But it wouldn't feel out of place.
I like where you're going, because I think something else needed to happen.
Yeah.
That to me seems a little far-fetched, even for Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of little visual cues in the movie that I love too. In the scene with the Velociraptors, I think it's either in the kitchen or when they're in the control room, you see all the binary code on his skin, because they mentioned earlier in the movie that it's 2 billion cells create the dinosaur DNA, and you see all the code on the skin of the Velociraptor. They reference it earlier on, saying there's over 2 million strands of code that help make these dinosaurs real.
Oh, I have to look at that. That's awesome. And with the visual cues, the way the T-Rex comes in is awesome.
When they do that, when he roars, the banner comes down and it says, "When dinosaurs roam the earth."
They were watching the film where Hammond explains how the park all came to be, and he said that they got dinosaur DNA, and you just hear Dr. Sattler turn and go, "Well, what's the source?" And when she says that, you see John Hammond walk by, and as soon as she says, "Well, what's the source of the DNA?" you see the head of his cane walk by, which is the mosquito and the amber. The T-Rex is coming, and it's a shot through a car's rear view mirror that says objects may be closer than they appear, and there the T-Rex is coming. I mean, just some great stuff. Yeah.
And I love Jeff Goldblum when he's in the back of that truck saying must move faster, and he's leaning on the stick.
Must go faster.
He has some fantastic moments. I love his character.
He does.
Yeah, I think he's a bright spot out of all the characters in terms of personality, being expressive and very enticing.
It's a good. Well, he's good, entertaining to watch for comic relief sometimes, but it's good comic relief. It doesn't feel like it's out of place. Yeah. It's there just because we have accepted that as his character.
See, here I am now by myself, talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
I would have rather seen him be the main character as opposed to Sam Neill, Dr. Alan Grant.
Well, hey, you got Jurassic Park 2, so but that was also terrible.
Yeah.
So
I think most of the sequels are pretty bad.
yes, actually, I think this is the only
Good
good
Jurassic Park. I don't think it should have ever been turned into a franchise.
No.
So many good standalone films have been franchised and turned into sequels, and
Right.
it's just never as good.
We're so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
We're moving so fast with technology, and this movie almost acts as a warning
Yeah.
to it about how we're advancing technology and giving up power.
When we have control again.
You never had control. That's the illusion.
I mean, John Hammond made crucial mistakes. He didn't have a backup generator
Yeah.
for the gates.
And I think that's mostly due to the fact that this was originally a book.
Yeah,
It
right.
was never a movie to begin with.
Right.
Michael Crichton wrote the book and did the screenplay.
Right.
And I think those underlying themes are what made this movie, come about. I bet I haven't read the book before, but I would bet you that there are some crucial plot points in the book that are left out of the movie.
Right.
That would have made it more plot driven.
Or even more characterization
Yeah.
or something. Because I mean, in a book, I don't know how well the thrills would work or the adventure. Like
You have to write it very suspenseful.
you're just reading
Yeah.
all these action scenes. I bet
Yeah.
it would be more plot driven and character driven.
Yeah, but even it is just like a fraction of what the novel or the novel's plot was, and added it into the film with the action scenes, it would have been much better than having the whole Dennis plot explained.
Or less plot.
Or less plot.
Yeah,
or really no plot.
I'm on the less plot side.
Yeah.
I mean, we need some setup.
Yeah,
of
there
course.
needs to be an establishment of what these characters are or who they are.
Yes, and
A background.
justification for this park. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely think that the whole DNA thing is great and pretty cool.
I think there should have been more explanation of Hammond in the film.
As a person,
As a person, I think I wouldn't call him the antagonist, but I think he definitely leads to a lot of the problems on the park.
would you call the dinosaurs the antagonist?
Yes, I would.
So he's the enabler of the
Yes,
antagonist?
if they were to make him more of the enabler of these beasts, maybe not intentionally,
Yeah.
maybe not with malicious intent, but somebody who maybe messed up or forgot to do certain things to make the park safe.
Sure, and that is what happened, but
Yeah,
we
that
didn't
is what
see
happened.
enough
No,
of
we didn't.
his reaction or
didn't.
his,
And a lot of scenes, the action scenes that you see Hammond in, he's either giving instructions or he's on the phone with somebody. He's not really explaining like, oh, what have I done? Why did I do this? There's very
Right.
few moments of regret he has.
Right. But would his character have that regret?
I think so. I mean, considering that he saw Sam Neill's, Dr. Alan Grant, save his grandchildren
Yes.
and realize that he caused the problem, I would think that
Right.
out of anybody,
I
he would
would've-
have the most significant change as a character from beginning to end.
I would have liked to see that, definitely. Speaking of Hammond, he says the phrase, "We spared no expense," 5 times in the movie, and I'm like, what is this? But
It's a little bit of foreshadowing, obviously, but
it's
repetitive.
just irony.
Yeah.
Well, they spared every expense.
Spared no expense.
He's acting like this is just the most perfect thing.
No, I mean they bred carnivores. I mean,
Right.
that should be red flag number one.
Right, exactly. So I really like the line because it tells a lot about his character, I guess, and that he really is naive
And
too.
then there's a whole part where Sam Neill and the 2 grandchildren, Tim and I don't remember what the
yeah.
girl's name was, but they're interacting with the Brachiosauruses, and he sees the eggs on the ground, and it's revealed that the dinosaurs have become male. The frog DNA caused them to turn male because they didn't have any male reproducers in this ecosystem.
Life found a way.
Something that I really liked, Sam Neill and the grandchildren
Yeah.
were sitting in the tree,
Yeah.
and Sam Neill has this raptor claw, and when he's in the tree with the kids, he just kind of tosses the claw.
it's gone.
Camera goes here. It really focused on it. Like it held that shot for like 3 seconds on just that claw just sitting there, and I'm thinking,
It's almost
what could
like
this mean?
it's almost like he felt just disappointed in himself because for so many years he was digging up dinosaur fossils, and in the same time it took him to do that, Hammond created a whole island full of real dinosaurs.
Oh, you took it to mean that?
Yeah, and he has this one piece that this one stifling breakthrough he was able to achieve. He found
Okay.
a dinosaur bone, but then he goes on this island and it's all just put to waste, and he kills it.
I interpreted that differently. What I think that means is that raptor claw was what he used to really scare the kid at the beginning. I mean, he really freaked this kid out. And he did not like kids, at the beginning.
Yeah.
At that point in the movie was when he was with the grandchildren, starting to kind of settle in and actually like them and not mind kids. And that claw was what he used to scare the other kid. I took that as him tossing away his dislike of children. You know what I mean?
Like I said, he's one of the only characters that actually undergo some sort of change.
Right, he
throughout
is.
the movie,
Right.
emotionally at least. That is true. That is true. But he saved them because it was do or die for them. It was survival instincts.
Yeah,
And
but through that,
he later realized that he likes them.
yes, through it,
Yeah.
right. So yes,
But it's
yes.
just so insignificant to me.
right. Does it almost feel tacked on?
It does feel tacked on.
Of course, if it hadn't happened,
I
it
feel
wouldn't
like
have been
it was a
good.
late addition to the film because it's so abrupt. Because they realize, there's no emotional change or any of these characters. We might as well make it for this one.
I read your book.
Oh, that's great.
My let's see. Oh gosh, my favorite scene has got to be the introduction of the T-Rex, or when everything started happening, when the power goes out and the cars are stuck. Just that entire sequence with the cars going off the edge and the T-Rex coming in, that has to be my favorite scene. Because also, just the build-up with that scene, and we hear the boom, and you see the water, the rings in the water. I love that scene.
Yeah. My personal favorite scene, I think, has to be when they first see the dinosaurs, and you see the amazement on Dr. Alan Grant's face, and you see this massive, this awe-inspiring landscape shot, and your jaw unhinged on the floor, gotta pick it back up because it's breathtaking.
Yes.
And it showcases just how great the CGI is in this movie.
Right. Yeah.
How lifelike it seems, and it could be a painting. You could freeze frame that and paint it, and it would look great in anyone's foyer.
Yeah, I definitely love that. And I would give this film a 9 out of 10. I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think the CGI is fantastic and the action is as well. But the plot for me is just too shallow, as are the characters. And I think that sort of takes away from not all that much, but enough to where it's very noticeable. And it's definitely lacking in certain elements.
For me, the plot is too much. I mean, I'd rather have it scaled back, but just the adventure, the score, a lot of these things combine, and I can kind of overlook my minor complaints because they're also easily ignored. They're not, so that's why it's a 9 out of 10. I really do love this movie, despite a few complaints. But this has been Movie Talk with Mason Cruzy
And Mitch Corrado, and remember, there's always something new waiting for you at the movies.